The demigod super soldier beings known as the Primarchs are one of the coolest things in Warhammer 40K. And while most of them are dead or missing after the Horus heresy, they have started to return to the setting. And there's set up in recent lore that suggests even more of them are returning. So I want to dive deep on this topic. I want to talk about the Primarchs returning and then focus heavily on the Primarchs that are going to be returning very soon. The Horus heresy is without a doubt the coolest and biggest piece of lore that's ever happened to Warhammer, and it's so significant that some of the novels in that series have actually broken out of the Warhammer fandom, and they've hit huge top sellers lists because they're just so cool and the story is so interesting. It's kind of the first thing that took Warhammer a bit mainstream, and the heresy itself is what it is because of the Primarchs. It's such a cool idea. God's broken children. God, of course, being the emperor. It's very akin to what they do in Greek mythology with Zeus and all of his children. That story and those characters with all the context, with all of their flaws, that is really what took Warhammer to the next level. And it's actually something that's missing from the current setting. And I can just tell you from the perspective of like a newer Warhammer fan, I find this to be freaking awesome. Like the idea of the Primarchs in general is so damn cool, but then them being gone but returning in the current setting, wow, dude, it's so cool. It's like, how could the Avengers come back when it comes to Marvel? It feels very fun to speculate about how all of that could go down. But again, not every Warhammer fan feels the same way about this as I do. In fact, I can feel some of you out there watching this video getting really angry, bubbling up as I'm talking about all of this. And I think the great fear from a lot of the Warhammer community is that this is going to cheapen the lore and feel gimmicky. The thing is, Warhammer does feel pretty pure right now, especially compared to Star Wars and Marvel and a lot of other Western IP that is controlled by big studios or corporations. And the thing is, Warhammer is bigger than it's ever been. It is very popular right now with 10th edition coming out, and it's cozying up to Amazon. If this Henry Cavill thing actually does go through at Amazon, you are going to have an explosion of popularity to the Warhammer brand and IP. And so I get the trepidation from Warhammer fans. I completely understand the concern that this pure thing might be cheapened and you might just utilize all of these dope Primarch characters and just kind of bring them all back and not do it properly or not have justice done to the deep lore and to this setting. But I will just say to those fans out there that if the recent return of the Lion is an example of how they're going to have the other Primarchs return, then I don't think you have anything to worry about, because this is freaking awesome. I want to do a whole video on the Lion's return. I definitely think I will, but suffice it to say, for the sake of this video, that the Lion didn't just pop back up, but instead came back changed. He's very different. He's aged 10,000 years. So not only does he look older, but his mental is different. And yet he clings to the past, and he has memories and guilt about all of the things that happened during the heresy and even before that. He's lonely and confused and like a fish out of water in this new millennia. To see the Lion changed, less secure, less sure of himself, and have his old ways of thinking juxtaposed against the harsh realities of the 41st millennia is fascinating. There's a lot of actual character stuff in there, and I can't wait to see what the Lion does next. A lot of people are talking about what's going to happen when the Lion meets Gilliman. He's also been given some new toys like the Emperor's Shield, a crazy sword called Fealty that he pulled from a stone. It's just really cool, man. Chef's kiss as far as I'm concerned, and it's too cool of an opportunity to not do with the other Primarchs. while I'm excited about the Primarchs returning, I think it's important to mention that there are a few Primarchs that simply never will. There's a few that this is off limits to. First up, there's Horus Lupercal. Now, Horus, of course, the traitor from the Horus heresy. He divides all of the Primarchs, causes the crazy civil war. He kills Sanguinius. He wounds the Emperor, and then the Emperor destroys Horus. But the Emperor doesn't just destroy Horus's body, he destroys Horus's very soul. On every level of reality, Horus was obliterated. So, unlike every other Primarch that we're about to talk about, whose soul would go somewhere into the warp after their death, Horus simply has no way of returning to the setting. And there have been attempts to clone Horus, even a successful clone of Horus that was destroyed by Abaddon. And that's because even if you clone Horus, you're not going to get that soul of Horus, and you're not going to get that juiced up demonic power that he had at the height of the Horus heresy. And while we're talking about clones, I should just say that there's technically the possibility of cloning every single one of the Primarchs. But I, like many in the community, think cloning the Primarchs to bring them back to the setting is silly. Now, the next two Primarchs that I want to talk about are the Primarchs of the 2nd and 11th Legion. Out of the 20 Primarchs that the Emperor created, 18 of them were perfect, or at least perfect enough for the Emperor's purposes, but there were 2 among the 20 Primarchs that were considered to be so flawed that not only did the Emperor destroy these Primarchs, but then all records of these 2 Primarchs and of their Space Marine chapters was erased from Imperial records. However, there's a lot in the lore to indicate that at least one of these Primarchs is still alive. After all, the lost Primarchs are often referred to as the Forgotten and the Purged. And there's a short story called The Chamber at the End of Memory, which happened during the Horus heresy. And this story gives us an explanation of the Forgotten and the Purged, as well as some interesting insight into the 2 lost Primarchs. The story basically involves Rogel Dorn finding chambers on this weird side of the Terran Palace, and the chambers have markings for the 2nd and the 11th Primarch. And Rogel Dorn then has a confrontation with Malkador the Sigilite about this. And it's revealed in that conversation that the Primarchs themselves have had their memories of the 2 lost Primarchs wiped. And this obviously upsets Rogel Dorn until it's explained to him that it was actually his decision. Dorn and Guilliman both agreed that it would be best if the memories they had of these Primarchs were removed. It's also revealed in a recent Adeptus Custodes Codex that the Custodes have something known as the Black Cells, this very secretive prison and archive below the palace on Terra. They have a prisoner down there known only as Subject 11. Now, going back to the Forgotten and the Purged, it seems like the 11th Primarch is very likely to be the Forgotten, and the 2nd Primarch is likely to be the Purged. And the main reason that people think that the 2nd Primarch was destroyed is because the Wolf King himself, Leman Russ, is given the title of the Emperor's Executioner. Leman Russ also discusses fighting other Primarchs before the Horus heresy and talks about how Primarchs had killed other Primarchs before. So yeah, definitely seems like Leman Russ killed the 2nd Primarch. But the 11th is probably in those black cells underneath the palace on Terra, being kept watch by the Adeptus Custodes. And honestly, that's kind of cool because that Primarch has a completely blank slate. So if there's ever something that GW wants to introduce to the setting, or maybe a new kind of style that they want to do for a big, cool character, they could just bring back this 11th Primarch and make that Primarch have any quality they wanted. Kind of an interesting thought, but the downside to bringing this Primarch back would be that there's no real attachment to the character. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here and why this is so cool is because these characters and what they did in the Horus heresy has endeared them to many of the players. The players have an idea of what these characters are like, and so bringing them back and having them become changed and sort of juxtaposing the new version of the character against the old version, that's like a big part of the fun, or at least that's what's happened with Guilliman, that's what's happened with the Lion. So you can't really do that with a Primarch that nobody knows anything about, but it's still cool. Still wanted to put it in the video. Okay, now let's talk about the Primarchs that are back in the current setting, and I especially want to focus on the ones that have models in the game, because of course when Games Workshop brings a Primarch back to the setting and gives them a model, they also accompany that with some novels, some books, some text within a new tournament book or a new series of events within a campaign. And so we currently have 3 Traitor Primarchs back in the setting with models, and that would include Magnus the Red, Mortarion, the Demon Prince of Nurgle, and Angron, Demon Prince of Khorne. Now, all 3 of these Traitor Primarchs come back due to the opening of the Great Rift. This is all because of the 13th Black Crusade that Abaddon the Despoiler went on. Abaddon, of course, is like a space marine that sort of took over for Chaos after the death and destruction of Horus. He's a bit of a meme in the lore because it took him 13 different crusades before he actually did something, but credit where credit is due, because at the end of the 13th Black Crusade, an important imperial planet known as Cadia is destroyed, and this causes a ton of different rifts to open up across the galaxy, splitting the galaxy in 2. It gave the Chaos Demons even more power, and some of the Traitor Primarchs that had become Demon Princes were able to actually return to physical reality. But as if to balance the scales, it seemed like the Emperor himself perhaps also gifted more power because of the Great Rift. Yeah, he resurrected Rabute Guilliman of the Ultramarines. Guilliman, who had always been more of a leadership type character than an actual warrior himself, took over control of the Imperium. And very recently, Lionel Johnson, the first Primarch, leader of the Dark Angels, yeah, that guy returns to the setting as well, except he returns on the other side of the Great Rift to Guilliman. And even though Lionel Johnson was never actually dead and instead was in stasis on the rock, it's still shown in the novel that talks about his return that his father had a large hand in bringing him back and setting him upon a path. So it seems like the powers of chaos are bringing back the Traitor Primarchs, and the Emperor himself is bringing back the Loyal Primarchs. But now let's talk about what Primarchs are actually going to be coming back, because the recent lore is pointing us right at some obvious things. First up, let's talk about Fulgrim. And I believe Fulgrim, being the actual ascended demon prince of Slaanesh, is still active in the setting. Last time anybody saw Fulgrim, he was on a pleasure planet just doing pleasure planet things. And I think Fulgrim's pretty disinterested in what's going on with the wider galaxy. But with Guilliman being resurrected and taking over the Imperium, and Chaos itself getting some massive W's due to the 13th Black Crusade, the opening up of the Great Rift, but also what just happened in the Arcs of Omens, there are a lot of different threads that could bring Fulgrim's attention back to what's going on with the wider galaxy. As I said earlier, the opening up of the Great Rift did empower a lot of Chaos users in the galaxy and helped to resurrect the other demon Primarchs. But the Arcs of Omen saw Vashtor, a new demon, enter the story and make an offer to Abaddon the Despoiler. Essentially, Vashtor offered use of a mega weapon, an ancient thing with the power to bring the Imperium of Man to its knees. And Chaos actually wins. Not only do they get all of the different keys to discover their actual device, but using that device, they're able to escape back into the war. So now Abaddon and Vashtor have access to this crazy ancient demonic machine. And we don't know where that goes next, but it is possible that a juiced up Abaddon, or maybe even Vashtor himself will enter the setting as a new mega threat for the Imperium. And perhaps with the idea of the Imperium actually being destroyed once and for all and the death of the Emperor of Mankind on the table, yeah, maybe that's enough to get Fulgrim back into action. I definitely think Fulgrim is the next Primarch to return to this setting, and there are a lot of other people in the Warhammer community, some with really good track records on reporting on rumors, that also think Fulgrim is coming back. But now let's talk about the Loyalist Primarchs, because this is also being set up by current lore. Now, the first Loyalist Primarch that I think might return to the setting is Leman Russ, the Wolf King himself. Now, part of the reason that I think Leman Russ is returning to the setting is a lot of setup in the novel about the Lion's return. Lionel Johnson, Son of the Forest, is an absolutely incredible book, but there's a lot of foreshadowing in there and a lot of visions that we have to interpret as far as what might be happening with the Emperor. Leman is mentioned several times in the book. There's a lot of discussion of how the Lion actually viewed the Wolf King, but on top of that, he actually fights the Wolf King at the end of the book inside this pocket dimension created by the Emperor. In the book, the Lion first wakes up at the edge of a riverbank in a forest, and he sees an old king inside a boat within the water of the river. As he goes to reach the king, he is stopped by one of the Watchers in the Dark, the little Jawa looking dudes that help out the Dark Angels. And the little warp Jawa tells the Lion that he is not yet strong enough to have that conversation with the king. Now, the Lion can also see these shadowy figures in the water that are surrounding the Emperor. Later on, the Lion enters a castle in this same weird pocket dimension. The same king from the vision that he had at the boat and the river that pretty much everybody agrees is the Emperor of Mankind. Yeah, that same king is in the castle where the Lion visits this vision again. And the king has 3 objects laid out in front of him on the table. They're described to be set in a ritualistic setting. And the items are a candelabra, a spear, and a chalice full of blood. Now, we're going to come back to this vision. It's really important to the other Primarch that I think is going to return. But for now, let's focus on the spear. Now, it's possible that the spear in the vision is referencing Leman Russ, because Russ was famously given a spear by the Emperor known as the Diason Spear. The spear was forged by the Emperor during the Age of Strife, and it has some of his essence or power within it. Now, interestingly, at the end of the book, Lionel Johnson comes back into this pocket dimension that the Emperor has created, and he fights against Leman Russ and other Primarchs before ultimately claiming the Emperor's shield. And so it's pretty clear that the Emperor is the one that brought the Lion not only back to consciousness, but brought him into this pocket dimension within the warp. The Emperor also took his own shield and had it stored at that place within that pocket dimension within the Immaterium. And the second vision, the one with the relic objects, is incredibly important, and part of the interesting aspect of that part of the book is that the Lion doesn't understand what these objects are. And the Emperor, that king, he glares at the Lion and he gets angry that the Lion does not understand. And a lot of people have interpreted this as the Emperor being upset that the Lion can't put together what he's trying to tell him, and he can't outright say it to the Lion because those shadowy figures, aka the Chaos Gods, are there watching. If the Emperor were to reveal what he actually wants the Lion to do, then Chaos would understand it and try to thwart that plan. And so because the Wolf King is mentioned several times in that Lion book, and because the spear is one of the ritualistic elements in that vision, and because the lion is currently with a bunch of blood angels, apparently about to meet up with some space wolves. Yeah, many fans speculate that Leman Russ will be returning to the setting, and that would make it 3 loyalist Primarchs going up against the 4 traitor demon prince Primarchs. And to round out that 4 for the Imperium, many fans believe Sanguinius himself will return to Warhammer. And this would be an absolutely incredible deal. Sanguinius is considered by most fans to be the most powerful of all of the Primarchs. And many people think that Sanguinius is actually what the Emperor was referencing with the Goblet of Blood. And there's a lot of evidence in the lore suggesting that Sanguinius or Sanguinius's soul is still around in the galaxy in some way, shape, or form. There's apparently an echo of Sanguinius's soul that exists on the Vengeful Spirit. This was Horus's ship. It's now Abaddon's ship. And it's an established thing in the lore that some people on the Vengeful Spirit will see this resurrected Sanguinius pop up on the ship from time to time, and then they battle that thing. There's also a being in the galaxy known as the Sanguinor who seems to be a living saint, maybe some part of Sanguinius's soul that the Emperor has brought back to life. The being is shown to look like Sanguinius and be just as powerful as Sanguinius, if not more powerful. There's also a part of the Devastation of Baal series where Dante, the blood angel that's been around for 1,000+ years and badly wants to die, yeah, he tastes sweet death in that novel series, and he's all about it. Very excited to finally die, and then he sees the spirit of Sanguinius, and Sanguinius tells him, "You're not done yet, my son," and sends him back, and Dante stays alive. It's also been revealed recently that Sanguinius's body is held in some kind of time stasis. And so it seems like the Emperor has been preserving Sanguinius's body, and he has been preserving Sanguinius's soul, or separate fractions of Sanguinius's soul. Now, the only potential problem for Warhammer if Sanguinius returns is the fact that he's just so powerful. Many fans believe if Sanguinius actually comes back to the setting, then it's pretty much over for Chaos. A resurrected Sanguinius would likely be the most powerful being in the universe. And it's likely that not even the combined efforts of the other traitor demon prince Primarchs could stop Sanguinius from extinguishing them. And for some fans, that's kind of a problem, because if the power scales of 40K ever dip too much into the favor of the Imperium, then you actually lose a lot of the fun flavor from 40K. It's like the idea of bringing the Emperor back. The day the Emperor of Mankind actually returns to the Warhammer setting, then Warhammer ends. There are no more battles. But I think it's actually possible that whatever's going on with Vashtor and Abaddon will see the arrival of either a new Chaos God or a new version of Abaddon in which he will be more powerful than ever, and perhaps even more powerful than Horus was. And that could lead to an incredible conflict between Chaos and the Imperium and these resurrected Primarchs. And I would absolutely love to see what would happen with the Imperium if all of those Primarchs came back. How would they all decide to lead mankind forward? How would they decide to push back Chaos? What actions would they take to try to eliminate the threats to mankind? It really does feel like Games Workshop is setting that up, and it's likely to take years to finally unveil itself. But when this happens, it will change Warhammer forever, and we will enter a new era of the game and a new age of the Imperium of mankind. That's all I've got for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.